International refugee law, the introductions, historical context, key definitions, legal instruments, principles of international refugee law, refugee status determinations, exclusion from refugee status, the rights of refugees, state obligations, significant case law, challenges, and conclusions. International refugee law is a complex and evolving area of international law that addresses the rights and protections afforded to individuals who have been forced to flee their home countries due to persecutions or conflict. This explanations aims to provide a clear and a detailed understanding of the key concepts, legal frameworks, and significant case law that shape this crucial field of law. The modern framework of international refugee law emerged in the aftermath of the World War II, a conflict that resulted in unprecedented levels of displacement across Europe and beyond. The international community, recognizing the need for a coordinated response to the refugee crisis, established the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, known as UNHCR, in 1950 and adopted the conventions relating to the status of refugees in 1951. Initially, the 1951 convention was limited in scope, applying only to events occurring before 1st January 1951 and primarily focused on European refugees. However, as new refugee situations arose globally, it became clear that a more comprehensive approach was necessary. This led to the adoptions of the 1967 Protocol relating to the status of refugees, which removed the temporal and geographical limitations of the original conventions, thereby expanding its applicability worldwide. The cornerstone of international refugee law is the definitions of a refugee itself. According to Article 1A, Clause 2 of the 1951 Conventions, as amended by the 1967 Protocol, a refugee is defined as a person who, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, memberships of a particular social group, or political opinion, is outside the country of his nationality and is unable, or owing to such fear, is unwilling to avail himself of the protections of that country, or who, not having a nationality and being outside the country of his former habitual residence as a result of such events, is unable or owing to such fear is unwilling to return to it. To qualify as refugee, one must have a well-founded fear of persecutions for reasons such as race, religions, or political opinion. They must be outside their home country and unable or unwilling to seek protections from it. All these criteria must be met. To fully grasp the scope of international refugee law, it is essential to distinguish between refugees to other categories of displaced persons. The first is asylum seekers. There are individuals who have left their country of origins and applied for recognitions as refugees in another country, but whose claims have not yet been definitively evaluated. Economic migrants or persons who leave their country voluntarily to seek better economic opportunities elsewhere. Unlike refugees, they do not flee persecutions and can return to their home countries safely. Internally displaced persons, or IDPs, are the people who have been forced to flee their homes but remain within their country's borders. While they may have fled for similar reasons as refugees, they are not considered refugees under international law because they have not crossed an international border. And finally, stateless persons. These are individuals who are not considered nationals by any state under the operations of its law. While some stateless persons may also be refugees, this is not always the case. The 1951 conventions relating to the status of refugees is the foundations of international refugee law. It defines who qualifies as refugee. It outlines the rights of individuals granted asylum and specifies the legal obligations of states towards refugees. Some of the key provisions include under Article 1, definitions of refugee, under Article 3, non-discriminations, Article 31, non-penalizations for illegal entry, Article 32, restrictions on expulsion, and Article 33, the principle of non-refoulement or non-refoulement. 1967 Protocol relating to the status of refugees. This protocol removed the geographical and temporal limitations of the 1951 conventions, making it truly universal in scope. It binds states to apply the substantive provisions of the 1951 conventions to all refugees covered by the definitions without any limitations of date or geography. Several regional instruments complement the global refugee protection regime. The 1969 Organizations of African Unity (OAU) conventions governing the specific aspects of refugee problems in Africa. This convention expands the refugee definitions to include persons fleeing external aggressions, occupations, foreign dominations, or events seriously disturbing public order. The 1984 Cartagena Declarations on Refugees. Although this is not legally binding, this declaration is widely applied in Latin America. It broadens the refugee definitions to include persons fleeing generalized violence, foreign aggressions, internal conflicts, massive violations of human rights, or other circumstances which have seriously disturbed public order. The Common European Asylum System (CES) is aimed to harmonize asylum procedures across European Union member states, including the Dublin Regulations, which determines which EU member state is responsible for examining an asylum applications. The principle of non-refoulement enshrined in Article 33 of the 1951 Conventions. It prohibits states from returning refugees to territories where their life or freedom would be threatened on account of their race, religion, nationality, memberships of a particular social group, or political opinion. This principle has achieved the status of customary international law. Therefore, it binds even on states that are not party to the refugee conventions. Article 3, with regards to non-discriminations, requires states to apply the provisions of the conventions without discriminations as to race, religion, or country of origin. This principle ensures that refugees are treated equally regardless of their background. Article 31 of the 1951 Conventions, with regards to non-penalizations for illegal entry, it prohibits states from imposing penalties on refugees who enter or are present in the territory without authorizations, provided they present themselves without delay to the authorities and show good cause for their illegal entry or presence. Right to seek asylum, while not explicitly stated in the 1951 Convention. This right is recognized in Article 14 of the Universal Declarations of Human Rights. This right is fundamental to the international refugee protection regime. Refugee status determinations, RSD, is the legal or administrative process by which governments or UNHCR determine whether a person seeking international protection is considered a refugee under international, regional, or national law. The process typically involves firstly registration. The asylum seeker registers with the relevant authorities. Interview. A detailed interview is conducted to gather information about the applicant's claim. Assessment. The authorities assess the claim against the refugee definitions and relevant country of origin informations. Decisions. The decision is made to either grant or deny refugee status. And finally, the appeal. In many jurisdictions, there is a right to appeal a negative decisions. The key considerations in RSD include well-founded fear, which has both a subjective component, the individual's fear, and the objective component. The fear must be well founded in light of the situations in the country of origin. Prosecutions, while not defined in 1951 conventions, prosecution is generally understood to involve serious human rights violations or the cumulative effect of various forms of harm. Convention grounds, the prosecution must be for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of particular social group, or political opinion. Credibility assessment. Decision makers must assess the credibility of the applicant's claim, considering factors such as consistency, plausibility, and demeanor. Article 1F of the 1951 Conventions. It provides for the exclusions from refugee status of persons who would otherwise qualify as refugees, but who are deemed undeserving of international protections due to certain serious acts. The exclusion clauses apply to persons who have first committed a crime against peace, a war crime, or a crime against humanity. B. Committed a serious non-political crime outside the country of refuge prior to admissions to that country as a refugee. And C. Been guilty of acts contrary to the purposes and principles of the United Nations. These exclusions clauses are intended to protect the integrity of the asylum system and ensure that it is not abused by those who have committed serious crimes. The 1951 Conventions grants refugees several rights. Some of these rights include the right to work, as provided under Articles 17 to 19, right to housing, right to educations, right to public relief and assistance, right to freedom of religion, right of access to courts, and right to freedom of movement. These rights are designed to ensure that refugees can rebuild their lives in dignity and safety in their country of asylum. States that are party to the 1951 Conventions and or its 1967 Protocol have several key obligations, which includes cooperating with UNHCR in the exercise of its functions under Article 35, providing information on national legislation enacted to ensure the applications of the conventions, Article 36, granting refugees the rights outlined in the conventions, respecting the principle of non-refoulement. It is important to note that even states that are not party to the refugee conventions are bound by certain principles of customary international law, and that includes the non-refoulement. One of the key cases, such as not the bomb case in 1955, the International Court of Justice held and established the principle of genuine connections between a state and its national. While this case is not directly related to refugee law, this principle is relevant for determining the nationality of a person for the purposes of diplomatic protections, which is also important in refugee context. The case of Amadou Sadio Diallo case in 2007, where this case elaborated on the genuine connection principle in the context of diplomatic protections. It reinforced the importance of considering an individual's actual ties to a state rather than merely formal nationality. Chahal versus United Kingdom, 1997. These landmark decisions held that the prohibitions on torture and inhuman or degrading treatment under Article 3 of the European Conventions on Human Rights has extraterritorial effect. It means that a state cannot return a person to another state where they may face such a treatment, regardless of the person's conduct or the threat they may pose to national security. This decision significantly strengthened the principle of non-refoulement in European human rights law. The R versus Home Secretary, ex parte Aden 2001, in the House of Lords, now Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. This case addressed the issue of prosecutions by non-state actors. The House of Lords clarified that prosecutions by non-state actors can fall within the refugee definitions under the 1951 conventions if the state is unable or unwilling to provide protections. This decision was crucial in expanding the understanding of prosecution's concept to include situations where the state is not directly responsible for the harm feared. The Minister for Immigrations and Multicultural Affairs versus Kawar, 2002, the High Court of Australia. This case dealt with the questions of whether domestic violence could constitute prosecutions under the Refugee Conventions. The High Court held that in certain circumstances where the state fails to protect victims of domestic violence, this could amount to prosecutions for reasons of memberships of particular social groups, in this case, women in Pakistan. HJ Iran and HT Cameroon versus Secretary of State for the Home Department, 2010, the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom. This case addressed the issue of refugee claims based on sexual orientations. The Supreme Court held that gay people should not be expected to conceal their sexual orientations to avoid prosecutions in their home country. This decision was crucial in recognizing that requiring individuals to hide a fundamental aspect of their identity to avoid persecution is incompatible with refugee protections. Protracted refugee situations in which many refugees spend years or even decades in exile, raising questions about durable solutions and the rights of long-term refugees. International refugee law faces several challenges in contemporary global contexts, such as mixed migration flows, the increasing complexity of migration patterns with refugees traveling alongside economic migrants presents challenges for refugee status determinations and protections. Climate change and displacement. The potential for large-scale displacements due to climate change raises questions about the adequacy of the current refugee definitions. Burden sharing. There is ongoing debate about how to ensure a more equitable distributions of responsibility for refugee protection among states, securitizations of asylum. Increasing concerns about national security have led some states to implement more restrictive asylum policies, potentially undermining refugee protections. The future developments in international refugee law may need to address these challenges, expanding the refugee definitions to include people displaced by climate change or other environmental factors, developing more robust mechanisms for international cooperations and burden sharing, strengthening the links between refugee protections and development assistance, and also enhancing protections for internally displaced persons. International refugee law, rooted in the 1951 Refugee Conventions and its 1967 Protocol, it provides a crucial framework for protecting some of the world's most vulnerable people. It defines who qualifies as a refugee. It outlines the rights to which refugees are entitled and establishes the legal obligations of states towards refugees. Key principles such as non-refoulement, non-discriminations, and the right to seek asylum form the cornerstone of this legal regime. The interpretations and applications of refugee law have evolved through significant case law, addressing complex issues such as persecutions by non-state actors, gender-based persecutions, and claims based on sexual orientations. These judicial decisions have played a crucial role in adapting refugee law to contemporary challenges and ensuring its continued relevance. However, international refugee protection regime faces numerous challenges, especially in this 21st century. Mixed migration flows, climate-induced displacement, securitizations of asylum, some of those. It addresses these challenges. In order to address these challenges, continued international cooperations, innovative approaches to protections, and a renewed commitment to the fundamental principles of refugee law. As the global context continues to evolve, so too must the national refugee law. A delicate balance must be struck between maintaining its core protective functions while adapting to new forms of displacement and persecutions. The future of refugee protection depends on the international community's ability to uphold the principle enshrined in the refugee conventions while developing new approaches to address emerging challenges.